All right, let's jump straight in. Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are unpacking something absolutely wild. We're taking a fascinating look at what some of the most provocative thinkers in history call the invisible architecture. Basically, the source material across psychology and philosophy suggests that there are these silent, unseen systems dictating almost everything we do. We're talking everything from the massive power structures of global institutions right down to the nitty-gritty of who we fall in love with and how we build our own legacies. We're going to impartially map out these intense frameworks for you today, so get ready to see the hidden wiring of the world.
Here is our roadmap for the explainer today. We'll start with the architecture of power, then move into the biological trap, the mechanics of attraction, the mirror of the void, and finally, forging a legacy. Let's get to it.
I want to start off by posing a rather provocative question. Why do fools rule and logic, well, completely fail? It's a paradox we see literally everywhere, right? The sources suggest that true, nuanced intelligence often loses out. Whether we're looking at climbing the corporate ladder, navigating political arenas, or even in our own romantic dynamics. Growing up, we're taught that being smart and logical is the ultimate superpower. But, as you'll see, the invisible architecture actually operates on a completely different set of rules.
Okay, part 1. The architecture of power and why systems systematically reward certainty over intelligence.
Think about Niccolo Machiavelli. He spent his entire life observing political courts. And you know what repeatedly shocked him? He kept watching brilliant minds get entirely bypassed in favor of, frankly, profoundly average ones. And our sources argue this isn't some weird accident. It's just the fundamental way human hierarchies function. See, an intelligent worker sees complexity, and complexity naturally generates doubt and qualification. To a massive system, that person is incredibly difficult to use because they ask uncomfortable questions. But on the flip side, a purely loyal worker? They offer simple answers. They offer absolute certainty, and most importantly, obedience. In the mechanics of power, projecting absolute certainty, even if you are dead wrong, is valued way higher than expressing justified doubt. Systems are basically just efficiency machines. They filter for obedience, not brilliance.
So it all boils down to this classic Machiavellian idea. He pointed out that power is seized and maintained through sheer effectiveness, not traditional moral goodness. We're simply reporting his analytical observation here, but the idea is that power systems require a very clinical, strategic approach. A leader who insists on always being the good guy, or being nice, often lacks that strategic coldness you absolutely need to maintain structure when things get chaotic.
Moving on to part 2, the biological trap, or, as Schopenhauer saw it, the illusion of romantic destiny.
Let's shift gears from political power to biological power. The 19th century philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer had this intense, almost clinical view of relationships. He introduced a concept called the will. And the will is this unconscious, blind striving that underlies all existence, and its one and only goal is to perpetuate the species. According to this framework, you know that overwhelming feeling of romantic destiny? That idea that you were meant to be with someone? It's essentially a highly sophisticated biological narcotic. Nature engineers this massive neurochemical high to completely override your rational self-interest just to ensure reproductive compliance. It's wild to think about.
But here's the catch. And modern neuroscience actually backs up what Schopenhauer theorized all those centuries ago. That intoxicating neurochemical cocktail of early romantic love, it diminishes dramatically within just 18 to 36 months. Basically, once biology has achieved its initial goal of bonding you together, the psychosis fades, and what's left behind isn't magical destiny, it's a logistical arrangement of shared finances, schedules, and everyday obligations.
Now, this leads to a pretty controversial stance from the philosopher. Schopenhauer observed that exceptional, deep intellectual flow absolutely requires radical, sustained solitude. But by their very nature, conventional domestic structures create this continuous background demand on your cognitive and emotional resources. For a truly focused mind, this creates massive structural friction, which actually explains why so many profound thinkers throughout history chose a path of total solitude just to protect their work.
All right. Part 3, the mechanics of attraction and the silent destruction of perceived value. When we look at modern dating through this clinical lens, the invisible rules suddenly become super apparent. Researchers found 3 highly specific behaviors that consistently collapse a person's perceived value. First up, emotional overexposure. Spilling all your emotional capital immediately biologically signals that you literally have no other options. Second, structural availability. You know, canceling your life's plans the second someone texts you? That signals your time has no independent weight or value. And third, validation seeking, fishing for reassurance. Biologically speaking, if you constantly need external validation, you are broadcasting to the world that your internal foundation is incredibly unstable.
The ultimate paradigm shift our sources recommend moves us completely away from that reactive mindset. Look, most people operate from a place of hoping to be chosen. They mold themselves to seek external approval. The truly attractive dynamic, though, that belongs to the person who is choosing. This person has a centered, independent structure. They evaluate a situation based strictly on their own internal authority. They don't lose value because they simply aren't playing a game designed to seek validation. Their worth is entirely self-generated.
Which brings us to part 4, the mirror of the void and the art of absolute composure.
So how do we actually apply this centered authority when we're facing blatant disrespect? The goal here is to induce something called ontological shock. Think of disrespect as kinetic energy just being hurled right at you. When you react, when you argue or get angry or defend yourself, you are catching their chaotic arrow and absorbing their energy. But if you act as an invisible mirror and offer absolutely zero emotional reaction, you completely sever the link between their action and the world's reaction. You literally make them question if their words even have mass.
And here is the exact protocol to achieve this. Step 1, the 4-second pause. When someone tests you, just stare at them with heavy-lidded silence. Count to 4. It feels like an absolute eternity and forces them to just sit there in their own awkward rudeness. Step 2, agree with the absurdity. If they throw a wild insult, do not defend yourself. Magnify it clinically. Step 3 is what we call the watchtower. Stop arguing the actual content of what they're saying and start analyzing their process. Say something super calm like, "I noticed your voice is highly elevated right now." Boom, you instantly shift from being a defensive participant in a fight to becoming the clinical director of the entire scene.
Now, a massive warning from our sources here. When you apply the mirror of the void, you are going to trigger what psychologists call an extinction burst. Because you are actively denying them the emotional supply they are totally addicted to, their toxic behavior will temporarily escalate. They're going to push harder, honestly, much like someone angrily mashing the buttons of a broken vending machine. The absolutely crucial point is that you must hold the line. You have to remain the obsidian wall until their chaotic energy reserves completely evaporate.
Finally, Part 5, Forging a Legacy. Destroying the inner slave to build an empire.
To achieve that level of absolute, unshakable composure, the source material prescribes a pretty intense journey of self-mastery. It's all about destroying the comfortable, mediocre habits you've inherited from your past so you can build something undeniable. Here's the framework for completely reconstructing your identity. First, study your origin ruthlessly. Map out the failures of your bloodline so you do not repeat them. Second, stop seeking permission from people who haven't even been where you're trying to go. Third, build in silence. Don't announce your plans to the world and invite sabotage. Fourth, weaponize your solitude to find deep, uninterrupted focus. And finally, burn bridges backward. Eliminate the safety nets that constantly tempt you to retreat into your old, comfortable, average life.
The core thesis of all our sources today really comes down to this. Real power is internal. It's an inside job. You are the architect of your own mythology. You don't just live a life of random accidents, you construct your narrative deliberately. But the sources are crystal clear on this. You cannot just graft ambition on a comfortable old habits. True transformation requires a kind of strategic cruelty towards your own weaknesses. It is total or it is nothing at all.
I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to take away from this explainer today. Will you be remembered? Or will you just repeat the exact same tired story your ancestors wrote before you? The invisible architecture is there. It's constantly operating in the background of your relationships, your career, and your conflicts. But now that you can actually see the wiring, the choice is entirely yours. Are you going to let the system manage you, or will you actively step up and take the empty throne of your own life? Thank you so much for watching, and as always, keep learning.